gallon. Oil now up to about $129 a barrel. Some believe it could hit $170 a barrel by the end of the week. This is a rare move since this war began, the U.S. making a move without all of its European allies at once. And the obvious factor, Europe is extremely reliant on Russia for its energy supplies. 25% of Europe's oil and up to 40% of Europe's natural gas supply comes from Russia, though we are learning just moments ago that the UK has announced that it will phase out the import of Russian oil and oil products by the end of the year, a phase-out. President Biden entering the Roosevelt Room there to make these comments. Let's listen to the president.
Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy. We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. This is a move that has strong bipartisan support in the Congress and, I believe, in the country. Americans have rallied to support the Ukrainian people and made it clear we will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war. We made this decision in close consultation with our allies and our partners around the world, particularly in Europe, because a united response to Putin's aggression has been my overriding focus, to keep all NATO and all of the EU and our allies totally united. We're moving forward with this ban, understanding that many of our European allies and partners may not be in a position to join us. The United States produces far more oil domestically than all the European countries combined. In fact, we're a net exporter of energy. So we can take this step when others cannot. But we're working closely with Europe and our partners to develop a long-term strategy to reduce their dependence on Russian energy as well. Our teams are actively discussing how to make this happen, and today we remain united. We remain united in our purpose to keep pressure mounting on Putin and his war machine. This is a step that we're taking to inflict further pain on Putin, but there will be cost as well here in the United States. I said I would level with the American people from the beginning. And when I first spoke to this, I said defending freedom is going to cost. It's going to cost us as well in the United States. Republicans and Democrats understand that. Republicans and Democrats alike have been clear that we must do this. Over the last week, I've spoken with President Zelensky several times to hear from him about the situation on the ground and to consult and continue to consult with our European allies and about U.S. support for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Thus far, we've provided more than $1 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. Shipments of defensive weapons are arriving in Ukraine every day from the United States, and we, the United States, are the ones coordinating the delivery of our allies and partners of similar weapons, from Germany to Finland to the Netherlands. We're working that out. We're also providing humanitarian support for the Ukrainian people, both those still in Ukraine and those who have fled safely to a neighboring country. We're working with humanitarian organizations to surge tens of thousands of tons of food, water, and medical supplies into Ukraine, and with more on the way. Over the weekend, I sent Secretary Blinken to visit the border between Poland and Ukraine and to Moldova to see what the situation was firsthand and report back. General Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of our Defense Department, was also in Europe, meeting with his counterparts and allies on NATO's eastern flank to reassure them, those countries bordering Russia, NATO countries, that we will keep our NATO commitment, a sacred commitment of Article 5. The Vice President Harris is going to be traveling to meet with our allies in Poland and Romania later this week as well. I've made it clear that the United States will share in the responsibility of caring for the refugees so the costs do not fall entirely on the European countries bordering Ukraine. And yesterday I spoke with my counterparts in France, Germany, and the United Kingdom about Russia's escalating violence against Ukraine and the steps that we're going to take together with our allies and partners around the world to respond to this aggression. We are enforcing the most significant package of economic sanctions in history, and it's causing significant damage to Russia's economy. It has caused Russian economy to, frankly, crater. The Russian ruble is now down to 50%, by 50% since Putin's announced his war. 1 ruble is now worth less than 1 American penny. 1 ruble is less than 1 American penny. And preventing Russia's central bank from propping up the ruble and to keep its value up. They're not going to be able to do that now. We cut Russia's largest banks from the international financial system, and it has crippled their ability to do business with the rest of the world. In addition, we're choking off Russia's access to technology like semiconductors and sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. Major companies are pulling out of Russia entirely without even being asked, not by us. Over the weekend, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they all suspended their services in Russia, all of them. Joining a growing list of American and global companies from Ford to Nike to Apple, they've suspended their operations in Russia. The U.S. Stock Exchange has halted trading of many Russian securities. And the private sector is united against Russia's vicious war of choice. The U.S. Department of Justice has assembled a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of Russian oligarchs. And we're joining with our European allies to find and seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets, and all their ill-begotten gains to make sure that they share in the pain of Putin's war. These, by the way, are giant yachts. You've put some of them in your press. I mean, some of them are, I think I read one was over 400 feet long. I mean, this is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The decision today is not without cost here at home. Putin's war is already hurting American families at the gas pump. Since Putin began his military buildup on Ukrainian borders, just since then, the price of the gas at the pump in America went up 75 cents. And with this action, it's going to go up further. I'm going to do everything I can to minimize Putin's price hike here at home. In coordination with our partners, we've already announced that we're releasing 60 million barrels of oil from our joint oil reserves. Half of that, 30 million, is coming from the United States. And we're taking steps to ensure the reliable supply of global energy. We're also going to keep working with every tool at our disposal to protect American families and businesses. Now, let me say this. To the oil and gas companies and to the finance firms that back them, we understand Putin's war against the people of Ukraine is causing prices to rise. We get that. That's self-evident. But, it's no excuse to exercise excessive price increases or padding profits or any kind of effort to exploit this situation or American consumers, exploit them. Russia's aggression is costing us all, and it's no time for profiteering or price gouging. I want to be clear about what we'll not tolerate, but I also want to acknowledge those firms and oil and gas industries that are pulling out of Russia and joining other businesses that are leading by example. This is a time when we have to do our part and make sure we're not taking advantage. Look, let me be clear about 2 other points. First, it's simply not true that my administration or policies are holding back domestic energy production. That's simply not true. Even amid the pandemic, companies in the United States pumped more oil during my first year in office than they did during my predecessor's first year. We're approaching a record levels of oil and gas production in the United States, and we're on track to set a record of oil production next year. In the United States, 90% of onshore oil production takes place on land that isn't owned by the federal government. And of the remaining 10% that occurs on federal land, the oil and gas industry has millions of acres leased. They have 9,000 permits to drill now. They could be drilling right now, yesterday, last week, last year. They have 9,000 to drill onshore that are already approved. So let me be clear. They are not using them for production now. That's their decision. These are the facts. We should be honest about the facts. Second, this crisis is a stark reminder to protect our economy over the long term, we need to become energy independent. I've had numerous conversations over the last 3 months with our European friends of how they have to wean themselves off of Russian oil. It's just not tenable. It should motivate us to accelerate the transition of clean energy. This is a perspective that our European allies share. and a future where together we can achieve greater independence. Loosening environmental regulations or pulling back clean energy investment won't, let me expand, will not lower energy prices for families. But transforming our economy to run on electric vehicles powered by clean energy, with tax credits to help American families winterize their homes and use less energy, that will help. And if we do what we can, it will mean that no one has to worry about the price of the gas pump in the future. That'll mean tyrants like Putin won't be able to use fossil fuels as weapons against other nations. And it will make America a world leader, manufacturing and exporting clean energy technologies of the future to countries all around the world. This is the goal we should be racing toward. Over the last 2 weeks, the Ukrainian people have inspired the world, and I mean that in a literal sense. They've inspired the world with their bravery, their patriotism, their defiant determination to live free. Putin's war has caused enormous suffering and needless loss of life from women, children, everyone in Ukraine. Both Ukraine and, I might add, Russians. Ukrainian leaders, as well as leaders around the world, have repeatedly called for a ceasefire, for humanitarian relief, for real diplomacy. But Putin seems determined to continue on his murderous path, no matter the cost. Putin's now targeting cities and has been targeting cities and civilians, schools, hospitals, apartment buildings. Last week, he attacked the largest nuclear power plant in Europe with an apparent disregard for the potential of triggering a nuclear meltdown. He has already turned 2 million Ukrainians into refugees. Russia may continue to grind out its advance at a horrible price, but this much is already clear. Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin. Putin may be able to take a city, but he'll never be able to hold the country. And if we do not respond to Putin's assault on global peace and stability today, the cost of freedom and to the American people will be even greater tomorrow. So we're going to continue to support the brave Ukrainian people as they fight for their country. And I call on Congress to pass the $12 billion Ukraine assistance package that I have asked them for of late. Ukrainian people are demonstrating by their physical courage that they are not about to just let Putin take what he wants. That's clear. They'll defend their freedom, their democracy, their lives. And we're going to keep providing security assistance, economic assistance, and humanitarian assistance. We're going to support them against tyranny, oppression, violent acts of subjugation. People everywhere, and I think it's maybe even surprised some of you all, people everywhere are speaking up for freedom. And when the history of this war is written, Putin's war on Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. May God bless all those heroes in Ukraine. And now I'm off to Texas. Thank you very, very much. I know there's a lot of questions. I know there's a lot of questions, but there's a lot more that has to be made clear, and I'm going to hold on that until we get more information. Thank you. Appreciate it.
President Biden there in the Roosevelt Room at the White House announcing the ban now being put into place, the U.S. ban on Russian oil products. This is the imports coming in from Russia, a significant move by President Biden. It had Republican and Democratic support from Congress. In fact, there had been growing calls in recent days for this to be put into place. He mentioned many European allies. They have been operating in lockstep with one another since Putin's war inside Ukraine. He said this particular step, though, he understood why many might not be in the position to do what the U.S. is doing at this moment because they are far more dependent on Russian oil. He also talked about gas prices here in the U.S. going up 75 cents just since Putin's unprovoked invasion began, suggesting it could go up, obviously, even further, and the steps that would be taken in the coming days and weeks to try to mitigate that. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, tracking all of this with me. She's live at the White House. And Cecilia, we had a sense this was coming, but the president had to make that decision, that equation in his head there at the White House about how hard this would hit the American people while trying to hit Vladimir Putin as well.
Yeah, David, he really has to walk a fine line on this one. And you heard him here say that this is another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. You know, really, there was this growing narrative in the last few days that the administration wasn't doing everything in its power to deliver another painful blow to Russia's economy. This was a major tool in the president's tool belt that they really had been hesitant to use, because you heard him say there are going to be a number of European allies who cannot go this far and take this step. Though we did, David, just find out that the UK is announcing its plans to start to phase out Russian oil. We expect other EU allies to start to do the same, but we're still talking about a long way down the road. This is going to take a long time for them to do because of this great dependency that they have on Russia's oil supply. The White House, as you've been saying, was really pressured to do this. There were pleas from Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine for them to do this. Bipartisan support on Capitol Hill. Nancy Pelosi said that they should absolutely do this. You heard the president there say, though, that the Americans are going to feel this. This is something that is going to hit Americans here at home. They're trying, this administration now, to figure out ways to use alternative energy. You heard the president talk about releasing oil reserves. And David, we've been also reporting out this trip that that officials here at the White House have taken in recent days to some pretty surprising countries like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, countries with huge oil reserves and not great relations with this country. At the potential risk of some political blowback, though, the administration trying to figure out which countries might be able to help ease some of this pressure on European allies.
Yeah, it will be fascinating to follow that part of the story in the days ahead. Cecilia, thank you. Let's get right to our chief business correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis. You heard Cecilia say the president warning the American people they could be feeling this here at home, and relatively quickly. Rebecca, what to expect here at home?
Well, David, this is frankly one of the most powerful financial weapons the United States has against Russia. Russia gets most of its money from oil exports to the world, but the trade-offs are clear. U.S. consumers, Americans, already paying $4.20 a gallon at the pump. That is an all-time record high. Americans paying about $250 million more today on gasoline than they were 30 days, a month ago, and that hits the poorest Americans hardest. It also has ripple effects on the economy. The more money you spend on gasoline, the less money you have to spend elsewhere. It can end up straining the economy and costing jobs if it persists for a long time. And there are also questions of how to make up this supply. The United States does produce a lot of energy, but ramping up domestic production isn't something that can happen overnight. They, in the energy space, in the energy industry, are facing some of those same supply chain constraints that we have heard about for the last year coming out of the pandemic. Meantime, you have those conversations that are happening with OPEC, with countries like Venezuela and Saudi Arabia, which might in the near term be able to make up some of the gaps, but don't come without their own controversy. And then, David, finally, you have this question of demand. Will American consumers demand less oil? Will American businesses demand less oil in order to help stabilize prices? Still a lot of unanswered questions, and clearly a big impact already on this economy, David.
Yeah, perhaps changes in the long term, but certainly not for families across the country in the short term who just have to get through their days with their own duties that they have to do with their own families. Rebecca, thanks so much. Tracking gas prices here at home. One more question before we go. We want to bring in our senior foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, live in Kyiv. Ian, you heard the president there saying Vladimir Putin may be able to take a city. He will never be able to hold the country. And we're curious how the ceasefires that had been promised to try to help some of these people trying to flee Ukraine, how that's working in the last 24 hours, what you saw there before the sunset.
Yeah, I mean, they've really been imperfect ceasefires. There have been thousands of civilians, however, not just today, but over the last couple of days, who've been able to get out of some key areas in Sumy, over by the Russian border. This is near the Kharkiv region. It suffered heavy bombardment overnight. There was one incident, 21 people killed, including 2 children. But today we saw Red Cross buses going into the town and signs that people were able to go out. But in other areas, for example, near here in Kyiv, around Irpin, we were there, we were witnessing thousands of people leaving the town over the last few days, and yet we were hearing the sound of regular bombardment. And there are other cities which are now totally cut off tonight. Some of them have been cut off for days, like Mariupol. They have no food, no water, no heating, and there are reports of bodies on the street. No one's collecting them, children sheltering in the basement. The suffering that's been imposed by Putin is absolutely evident everywhere. But the other key thing to bear in mind, in terms of their advance, yes, it's moving forward, but it's kind of inching forward. the Russian forces have not taken one major city since they took Kherson 4 or 5 days ago. They're trying to move on these places, but so far their success is being slowed by the Ukrainian resistance. And when President Biden talks about Ukraine will always remain free and belong to the Ukrainians, President Putin has certainly bitten off a huge chunk here, and it remains to be seen whether or not he can achieve his war aims as he intends, without these consequences paying too heavily for him.
Ian Pannell right there in Kyiv for us. Ian, thank you. Describing, of course, the worsening humanitarian crisis there on the ground in some of these cities that have had their own supplies cut off, and they're waiting to get out, and of course the refugee crisis that we continue to watch as they flee the borders. Again, President Biden moments ago announcing before the American people and really the world this U.S. ban on Russia oil imports. Gas prices certainly expected to go up even higher here at home in the short run. We'll continue to follow this at ABC News Live, abcnews.com, and of course I'll be back with the entire team you just saw here later today for World News Tonight. I'm David Muir in New York. For many of you in the East, your noon news is next, and I'll see you soon. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.